I'm not on. We're muted.
Okay, well, I was muted, so we're going to start all over again. Hi, this is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, and apparently not a master of the Movo mic, because the little red dot means I'm muted. I only had it here for a year and a half, so the fact I didn't see the red dot is amazing. But nonetheless, we're going to talk a little about something I do know about, and I don't know about the Movo mic, but I do know about what's happening in the Supreme Court. And so I think, and we're going to talk a little bit about CNN and some transitions at CNN also a little bit later. So, I think we'll have some stuff that you'll be interested in. And once again, the objective is to keep people informed of what's going on. Wanted to talk about three of the justices that are three of the people who are being considered by President Biden to be the appointed to the Supreme Court, and give you a little bit of background on them. And you can kind of see which way President Biden's going based on what ends up happening in terms of his appointments. One thing we know is that President Biden's going to want to make certain that he's able to get, he really wants to be able to get Republican support for it. There has never been a Supreme Court justice approved by a 50-50 vote with the vice president deciding. And he really wants to avoid that precedent. So he also has a challenge in terms of keeping his Democrat senators in line, as we know with Senator Manchin in particular, who has expressed some concerns in the past over various things, although he's been relatively straight in terms of voting directly with Biden on appointments. So it may not be as big of an obstacle as one might assume. I want to talk today about three of the potential nominees, and you can look up each of these names yourself and kind of get a sense of who they are. But let me just give you three of them, and these are pretty well established in the media as being people who President Biden is definitely looking at. I'm going to start with a woman named Leandra Kruger, and once again, as you remember, this President Biden has set as a criteria that it must be an African-American woman. So all of these people are African-American women. We're not going to discuss that because that's somewhat irrelevant. We're talking about, who they are, qualifications and the like. I'm just going to give you a little thumbnail on them. And each one brings their own, some baggage to the table, but we'll talk a little bit about it. Leandra Kruger is currently a California Supreme Court justice. She has argued, she was at the Department of Justice under Obama, and she is and she has argued at the Supreme Court level in front of this court against things like, the main one is the ability of religious groups to be able to choose their own leadership. The case was about EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, said that was saying that a Christian organization, was not allowed to use Christian, if the person was a Christian or affiliated with that denomination, as a criteria for hiring people on their staff. So that was essentially the nuts and bolts of the case. And Leandra Kruger argued very vociferously, so much so that it's described in the media as really kind of stunning even the liberal justices on the court against a religious organization, be able to hire people based upon religious criteria. And she was dead set against it. She was not just against it, but she was vehemently against it. And her arguments were very, very passionate against that concept. So she lost by a 9-0. The liberal justices disagreed with her. The conservative justices disagreed with her. So clearly on the religious liberty front, she would be out farther to the left than any of the current justices, and was further left than Breyer. So this would move her appointment, and commission would move the court further to the left on religious liberty issues. So that's something that we know about her. We know that that she has she is an Ivy League educated person, and went to Ivy League law schools. I think it's Yale, and so, you know, and just a short kind of synopsis. That's something that you can take away from this, so you know something about her record, not about anything else, just her record. Um, Another person who's being considered is a woman by the name of Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she has been on the District Court of Appeals since June of 2021. She has not signed, and so District Court of Appeals is the appeals court that decides most of almost all of the cases, disputes amongst administrative agencies and regulations. It's known as the stepping stone to the Supreme Court, and almost as a mini Supreme Court, because a lot of times what they decide becomes law, because the Supreme Court doesn't hear every case. So they are almost known as the mini Supreme Court. She's been on there since June of 2021. She has not written a single opinion in the 6 months since she's been on there. She was a Biden appointee. She was confirmed by the Senate obviously in May of 2021. So she was confirmed by this Senate. She has but we can't derive much from any writing she's done, because she hasn't written an opinion at the appeals court level. But what we can do is we can take a look and say, well, what was she doing before? She was a district judge, and one of the things remarkable about her as a district judge is that she had a history of making decisions that were overturned by the District Court of Appeals. So the court she was on now has been on for 6 months, with no real record to show. Had previously overturned a number of her decisions as a district court judge. Once again, the District Court of Appeals has been dominated by the Democrats, by Democrat appointees. Way back during the Obama administration, there was a big fight, in fact, about whether or not that District Court of Appeals should be expanded by 3 judges. And it really became a massive fight in Washington, D.C. A little bit of internal baseball on it. But the reason the Democrats wanted to do that was because they wanted to make the appointments of 3 additional judges, because that court is so important. It's so important as it relates to deciding fights between the powers of the administrative state and trying to limit powers of the administrative state. And they wanted to have big government people on that court. So they expanded by 3. So they had more dominance from the left over cases dealing with the administrative state. Now Ketanji Brown Jackson was not one of didn't get an appointment then. She didn't get an appointment until 7 years later. But that court would repeatedly would kind of say, no, we don't really think your opinion is right. And as a result, she got overturned quite a bit. I'm going to just take a look here for a second, because there was interesting cases where would have barred Homeland Security from enforcing a decision that expanded its reach of expedited removal process. And so this was an immigration. And she had ruled that stopping Homeland Security from actually taking people and removing them from the country who didn't belong here, who would come illegally. The District Court of Appeals said, no, you're wrong. All 3 judges overturned her very long written decision, and said, nope, you didn't get it right. And so even the people on the left on that court, and looking at the law, said you couldn't justify the position she was having. Now, I will tell you, she is probably the odds-on favorite for being picked. She's the person who's been pushed by the left really hard as a potential Supreme Court nominee. And so so she's got kind of the institutional push from the left, but it is and so that just tells you what you need to know in some respects, because they know where she stands on issues, whereas she'll never tell you and I where she stands on issues. So there's but she does have that reputation of coming up with opinions that people who you would think were appointed by Democrat judges take a look and say, that's even too far for us. So that's what you need to know about her. There's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about in the future, but this is, once again, it's just a little thumbnail, so you have a little bit of knowledge about some of these people, and you can be smart about talking about them. Because quite honestly, if we end up spending our time talking about that it's a Black woman, and because that's the criteria Biden has set, that's a loser. And Republicans in the Senate are going to want to have actual reasons why they shouldn't vote for those judges. And in order to make certain you get the least radical judges possible, we have to be prepared to have those discussions and be informed. So that's what we're trying to do here. The third judge that's being talked about, and the one judge that Joe Biden has confirmed is on her list, is District Court Judge Michelle Childs. And Michelle Childs is a district court judge in South Carolina. She went to the University of South Florida. She graduated from the University of South Carolina Law School. The reason I mention that is because of the three that we're discussing, she's the one who didn't go to Yale or Harvard. She's the one who is an Ivy League product. And one of the things that I've believed for a long time, and this is not an endorsement of any candidate, because that would be negative in the eyes of Biden. But one of the things that I've argued for a long time is that the diversity that the court needs is a diversity of academic experience. That when you have academics, judges, no matter if they're appointed by somebody on the right or the left, if they come out of the same law school systems, the same law school frame of thinking, where the parameters of legal thought are set in law school, where it gets beaten into you for 3 years, it is people are constrained by how they learned and what the guardrails are, and so you really want a diversity of academic experience. So those guardrails are not all the same. So people are looking at things from different perspectives with different capacity to say, wait a second, that's not in the way I think in terms of the structure of how I think about the law. And while we should hopefully have people who are going to be textualists, will look at the law and say, hey, I care about what the Constitution says. I care about what the actual law of the Congress says. I'm not going to interpret it. I'm not going to say, what were they thinking? I'm going to say, what did they write on paper in terms of the law? And I'm going to make decisions based on what the law actually says. That's the way Scalia did it. It's the way that anybody who sits there and looks at a court should want a justice to do, because quite honestly, I don't care what the judge thinks. I want to know what Congress, who we elected, actually passed into law, because if they pass something stupid into law, like in the Clean Air Act, leaving an open end for the EPA to make it so carbon dioxide can be declared a pollutant, that's Congress's fault by making that open end. And that's something Congress needs to fix. It's not a judge's job to fix that, although I wish they would. So ultimately, a judge who says, I'm going to read what Congress did, I'm going to read how it squares with the Constitution, I'm going to make a decision based on whether what Congress did is constitutional. That's a judge who a Republican will typically appoint. A judge that a Democrat will appoint is somebody who will say, okay, here's what Congress wrote, and I'm going to try to read into it what they meant based on my worldview, and then figure out a decision I can make with using some Supreme Court precedents of the past to somewhat justify my decision. That's how you get the legislator justice. And the Democrats tend to lean towards the legislator justice, who believe that the Constitution is a living document. So you really don't have to pay much attention to what it actually says. So that's the philosophical divide we belong in. Michelle Childs, back to her. Michelle Childs, daughter of a cop, Lindsey Graham has spoken highly of her, and as has James Clyburn, who's the far left Democrat who is responsible. Most people credit James Clyburn as being the person who's responsible for Joe Biden getting the Democrat nomination, because James Clyburn delivered South Carolina for Joe Biden. And if he hadn't won South Carolina, he would not be president. So that is, and I'm talking in the primary. So that is so James Clyburn has a lot of stroke with Joe Biden, and and Clyburn is recommending her. So she's a name you need to be really familiar with, is Michelle Childs. And you can look up decisions she's made, although she's not on an appeals court. So we don't have decisions, actual opinions she's written and the like. We do know that her father was a cop. And the left is using that against her. Ketanji Brown, by the way, her father was a police officer also. So just so you understand, that's a Ketanji Brown Jackson. So that's a common denominator between those two. So you've got those. There's going to be a lot of information that flows. If one of the criteria that Joe Biden uses is, will I be able to get this person through without a massive fight? Well, that's knowing that Lindsey Graham from South Carolina speaks favorably of Michelle Childs, certainly gives some credence to her being the nominee. Knowing that some people on the left feel she may be astonishingly too conservative on criminal justice issues, or too fair on criminal justice issues, may work against her in terms of being able to secure the votes of some of the far left in the Senate. So that's the balancing act that Biden has to play. I think there's some things we have to just kind of write into what we can expect. There won't be a nominee who is not already on record as being strongly in favor of keeping Roe v. Wade and strongly in favor of stopping anything that even touches on giving states any kind of leeway as it relates to abortion. That's just a guarantee. I think it's a guarantee that on the religious liberties front, that anything dealing with where you see a clash between religious liberties and any of the gay or transsexual issues that are kind of building, I think that will be a litmus test that if they don't answer that question right in private with Joe Biden, they don't get appointed. So just understand that on those kinds of issues, on those kinds of core cultural issues, there's a really good chance that there's anybody on the right in the Senate could actually confirm from a philosophical perspective. Now, so what are they going to consider? They're going to consider, is this person somebody who is going to have the temperament where they will be able to actually honestly consider issues. They're going to make a decision on that. They're going to make a decision on their intellectual firepower. Are they somebody who is going to be an addition to the court by virtue of their intellectual capacity to actually be a working member of the court? They're going to consider whether or not somebody has a temperament to be on the court. Because if you have somebody who is, shall we say, anybody who's worked in an environment where somebody is like always mad and angry all the time, you can't have that on the court. You got 9 of them. They're there forever. So somebody who doesn't get along is by definition a kind of a disaster. So they'll look at that. How do they get along with others? And those are all considerations that Joe Biden will give. I will tell you, it's my hope that the Republicans don't just roll over on this. The Democrats were given a nominee in Justice Kavanaugh, who had been confirmed by the Senate, was universally seen as being somebody who had the temperament to be on the Supreme Court, had the intellectual firepower to be in the Supreme Court. In years past, would have been a slam dunk. And we saw what the Democrats did to try to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's nomination and how far they went to try to destroy that nomination with the Christine Ford Blasey allegations, which were completely made up. So we saw what they were willing to do. We saw the attacks on him, on the personal attacks, the going back and kind of making stuff up, the various so-called victims who came forward who were just proven to have made stuff up. And so we saw their willingness to do whatever it took to stop him from getting on the bench. And that is something that, sticks with you. I don't believe we should go to that extent of making stuff up, having false witnesses like the Democrats did. But I do believe we have to put any nominee under really intense scrutiny. We need to make them earn. I'm talking the people on the conservative side, the people we have to try to get you and I have to try to get the senators to actually be tough votes for any nominee to get, and have the nominee have to prove to those senators that they should be on the bench and make them earn it. And that means no just kind of rubber stamping here. The Senate, Republicans in the Senate need to hold those nominees, whoever the nominee is, up to the highest standard. They need to really delve into their background, what they think. And if somebody won't answer questions, then that should be counted against them in terms of where they fit in the overall scheme of things. Make the Democrat nominee earn it. The Democrats, even in the minority, did everything they could to undermine Amy Coney Barrett and certainly Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And so at the very least, the Senate Republicans have to hold the Biden nominees to the same high standard. And in doing so, they will be doing their job. And so that's what we have to hold them to. None of this rubber stamping, none of this, oh, well, they seem like it's okay and Biden has a right to put whoever they want to on the court nonsense. They have a constitutional duty to take a hard look at whoever's going to be on this lifetime appointment and make certain that they're suitable for the job. And we need to hold them to that standard. So that's where I've got, that's where we are on this in terms of the Supreme Court. And, we've got to take actions up on the Supreme Court and we will be putting stuff out to you guys, telling you exactly what, to get members of Congress to hold, urging them to hold, the senators, urging them to hold any nominee to the highest legal standard and make certain that they will have the temperament and intellect to be members of the Supreme Court. So that's the Supreme Court wrap up. Now let's go to something that's kind of fun. CNN, formerly known as Clinton News Network until they got transformed into the Commie News Network. CNN is having a problem. Their ratings are in the dumpster. They're getting so few viewers that it's really almost comical how the left, nobody watches CNN. So a once proud brand, although left-leaning, has been destroyed the last 9 years, while Jeff Zucker was the one who ran it as the president. While Jeff Zucker just had to announce his retirement, he was removed as CNN president. CNN has essentially been spun off into something called Warner Media out of the AT&T Time Warner merged entity. They've created something called Warner Media that's spun off a lot of parts of that AT&T Time Warner merger, and CNN's part of that. The Warner Media people, the new company, is basically saying you have to pull your own weight. We're not going to be able to support you anymore. CNN was essentially an organization that wasn't pulling their own weight. They were prestige for the liberal talking class, but they weren't actually contributing to the bottom line of AT&T. They were losing money, and so the president of CNN no longer is president of CNN. So Jeff Zucker's gone, and we'll have so they're going to appoint somebody new in the near future. What you can expect to have happen is, according to what people have been talking about. There's a lot of talk about CNN effectively changing a lot of what they're doing in the primetime lineup. And by changing it, I mean going more towards a harder news perspective and less opinion. Now, the hard news will be to the left of center, interpreted to the left of center, but it will be much less opinion driven and much more basically trying to pretend like they're giving you the news in a meaningful way. So that's the shift that's likely to occur. CNN has lost the battle with MSNBC on the left-wing opinion journalism game, and so they're going to try to rebrand to go back to what they were when they were the Clinton News Network, and that's what the Warner Media people have said they want to do. So that one, because they think they can move to the middle and establish a more of a center-left audience rather than the left socialist audience that they've been going for over the past few years, and quite honestly lost the battle over. So that's where they're likely to go. But right now, you're going to see. Don't be surprised if you don't see in the months ahead CNN personalities leaving rapidly in terms of leaving the network, contracts not being renewed, and the like, because they are going over a complete rebrand, and the old CNN faces don't work for where the Warner Media people want to take CNN. And so expect to see a lot of the people who we've all come to kind of almost be stunned in disbelief by some of the things they say to find their way out of the CNN orbit, or at least move to the nether regions of the CNN orbit. They're on TV all the time. They don't have a regular show. And so that's what's happening with CNN. It's a dying network that's going to try to revive itself in some way. The only way they'll actually succeed, in my estimation, is to sell their places on the dial, their places that they have on DirecTV and Dish TV and the various cable companies, to sell those places and that real estate, and have the company then be completely rebranded as something else, not CNN, but some other name, and become a totally different entity. At which point they will be able to compete, because they'll be competing with prime real estate on the cable dial without the baggage that the name CNN brings to the table. So that's where I think it's going to happen with CNN. They are, and quite honestly, they lost. A great victory is the fact that the Fox and OAN and other conservative Newsmax and other conservative networks have a significantly larger audience than the CNN and MSNBCs. And CNN has lost the battle for audience. The market has decided that CNN doesn't have a right to exist for all intents and purposes. Certainly not the cost that they impose. And so their real value at this point isn't their content. The real value is the fact the places they locate on the various dials, and as a result, they will be forced, in my estimation, they'll be forced to do a total rebrand. They might be called Warner Media, for all I know, but I think we're seeing the last gasps of CNN. By the way, they've given up their airport channel, so they're not even going to be on the airport. Anybody who's been to an airport lately will see that the screens are blank. That was costing CNN a lot of money to have that real estate, and they gave it up because they didn't have the cash to pay for it. So that's those of us who are on the conservative side, man, that's CNN's failure doesn't break my heart. And in fact, it's an affirmation that the public far prefers center-right programming rather than center-left programming. And that's an affirmation that, once again, for people who actually want to know what's going on, they want content that groups like Americans for Limited Government put out, not content put out by far left advocates. So good news for our side. Keep supporting more conservative media. That's pretty much what we've got on this thing. I'm trying to look and see if we have any quotes in here, anything I need to pull up. And there's all sorts of things in here that I've missed because I'm not very good at this. You know, I'm just going to go down. And Michael Brand had a great quote, and it's it talks about, it kind of says, Biden's pick could hold views that are contrary to the typical American. Don't you mean that pick of Biden's handlers / puppeteers who are really running this radical leftist socialist show? Well, the answer is Joe Biden will have his name on it, but let's be honest, it's more likely to be Ron Klain's pick, who's the White House chief of staff, than anybody else's. But we do. Biden is the figurehead that is there, and so I'm not going to make any. And I also, quite honestly, Joe Biden, the single most important. Remember, Joe Biden's operating off of muscle memory. Joe Biden is a politician. Joe Biden knows that Jim Clyburn got him the nomination. So Joe Biden's going to be very receptive to somebody who got him the nomination, to appointing somebody that person likes. He's got people who he's beholden to, but ultimately, yeah, there's people who are handlers, but people made the same kind of, said the same thing about Reagan. They said the same thing about, all throughout a lot of presidencies, they say the same thing. And, we all recognize Biden's shortcomings. We all recognize some liabilities that exist. But let's not dismiss the idea that a guy who was elected largely due to the support of one individual who resurrected their campaign, that individual isn't going to have a great deal of input in terms of the choice. And quite honestly, I can't dismiss that, that Biden is going to be able to make this choice. I don't know he's going to make the choice by throwing darts at a dartboard, but the fact is, the guy surprised me in the past. I didn't think that Joe Biden would be able to stand up and do the debate, and he did. Now we can think there might have been some electronic, chicanery, but he did. He was able to stand up and do the debate with Donald Trump and not fall apart. So let's just stick with Biden, and accept that it's likely that the people who are his handlers are playing a big role in making the decision. But truthfully, that's true with any president. Let's see what else we got. We need religious liberties. Yes, we do. Good news is that on the religious liberties front, you have 6 appointees by Republican presidents. Bad news is, we don't know where Roberts is not always on the right side on these things, and so it's really a dogfight to win those cases, and so it's really incumbent upon us to just keep fighting and praying in terms of religious liberty cases. I never thought we'd be in a place where we had to pray that we would have the capacity to do things like pick who's going to be the pastor of our church, and say, well, we can only allow somebody to pastor who, if you're in the United Methodist Church, for instance, we're only going to allow somebody who's a United Methodist to be a pastor in our church. Seems like pretty basic qualification, but those kind of decisions are coming down, and those kind of cases are being done. I never thought we'd have to worry about, gee whiz, I have a flower shop, and somebody can come in and demand that I have to provide flowers and go and participate in a wedding that I am morally in opposition of. It seems to me that'd be completely obvious, and yet it isn't to the Supreme Court, particularly since lots of flower shops. It's not like there's only one in town. So it's really predators who are going in trying to find somebody who would say no, and then drive them out of business by subjecting them to this kind of litigation. So those are the kind of things that just drive me nuts. And it doesn't make sense to me that we're sitting there and having to fight these cases. But the fact is, the Democrat appointed justices are going to be bad on those cases. We just need to make certain that in the future, that any Republican appointed justices, we have a pretty good track record of where they're going to be on those cases, so we know that when they get to the Supreme Court, that they're going to be standing for First Amendment for religious liberties. Let's see here. I have, Pamela Harrell, exactly right. Nobody has the right to tell us what we should believe, and the fact of the matter is, throughout history, the more oppressive a government is against Christianity, the more Christianity grows. China has about 200 million Christians in it, and you go to jail for being a Christian. You go to jail for having a Bible. In China, they pass around books of the Bible, and so nobody has a full book with them, so a full Bible with them. They just have individual books, because you can replace a single book of the Bible, one of the 66 books of the Bible. You can replace that much easier than you replace all 66. And so there's the underground church in China is very diligent to try to spread the word and to work in a clandestine manner to protect the most precious thing they have, and that's the word of God. So understand, and when you're operating in that kind of world, when you're talking to people, believe it or not, it's much, you're confiding in people, when you're getting the trust of people, you become very intentional about spreading the word and becoming a real disciple. And you know the word of God because you're holding that one book of the Bible, and so you memorize it. You have it deeply hidden in your heart, and so it comes out at all times when you're talking to people, and they say, "What do you do? Where do you get this?" And you can introduce them to Christianity, introduce them to Jesus Christ, the loving grace of Jesus Christ. So yeah, oppression. No one wants America to be oppressed, and our religious liberties to be oppressed. But understand, in places where it is, God uses that for good. It uses to spread the gospel, and it's up to us in a place where we're relatively unoppressed to hide that word in our heart, so we can be effective disciples of God, of Christ, and spread the gospel through not just our actions, like some people won't pretend, but also through our words, through our ability to answer questions and to approach people and actually provide answers. So yeah, that's an important distinction. And Michael, you're right. This sounds a little bit contrary because Christ said, turn the other cheek. And I guess if you're turning the other cheek and you're Senate Republicans, you should say, oh, well, we don't really care what you did to our nominees. But bottom line is, I don't ever think we should go through what we should do to a nominee, what they did to Kavanaugh. I do think that what they tried to do with Amy Coney Barrett's fair game and going after anything they've written, going after any, so you get the full judicial philosophy on trial. And you don't have to agree with the judicial philosophy. What you have to be able to do is force them to defend it. And if they can't defend it, in an intelligible way, then they shouldn't be on the Supreme Court. It's just clear, because the Supreme Court is like the philosopher kings sitting there fighting about esoteric things and having high-minded principles against one another. And if you're not able to defend that, then you have no place on that group of nine. And so that's what the Senate needs to do, is make certain that somebody has that capacity and they have, once again, the temperament where they're not going to be somebody who basically ends up causing massive turmoil on the court because they view it as a war room rather than as a place to try to determine what the Constitution means, and through various means. So that's part of the challenge they have, and they need to make certain that every nominee has that scrutiny. Good riddance to CNN. Yeah, no kidding. But just remember, folks, we have to, in some ways, we always move beyond the battles and say, okay, well, that one's over. The fact that the fact that CNN is going through a transition at the top, the fact that CNN is going to have entirely new leadership and likely entirely new personalities on the air, at least in the primetime network. The fact that that's occurring is a victory. It is a victory. They have been denied an audience. They were forced to go far left because they were fighting for the far left audience. And now they don't have an audience. So that is a victory. And CNN, bottom line is they made a choice. And I'll tell you, I've got a friend who was let's say he worked in the production area of CNN and was working in said production area during the 2016 presidential election on election night. And he was there watching the behind the scenes when they're off air, the reaction of the people who are the analysts to Donald Trump's election. And as it was becoming more and more apparent that Donald Trump won. And, sometimes I'll go just for fun to the YouTube channel where you get to see anchors react to Donald Trump winning and just to watch how they all sort of melt down. Well, the meltdown behind the scenes was so much more epic than what was actually on stage. And, and this guy would tell me what actually happened. And it was like, just without breaking any confidences, because I don't want the guy to get in trouble. It was let's just be clear. They were so upset that they were beside themselves. They were, and from biblical terms, they were pouring ash over their head and ripping up their clothing. That's the level of upset. They were beyond themselves. They were out of control, and they had to pull it together for as much as they could to actually be on air. But off air, and behind the scenes, the production crew and many of the production crew were just absolutely apoplectic, unbelieving that Hillary was not elected. So these guys are not good guys. They're not on our side. They're not honest journalists. They don't pretend to be, and they don't deserve to have a place on the dial. And now I think they won't. So that's good news. And with that, I'm going to just end it with this. Your involvement, your engagement, and I say this virtually every time we do it, but I think it's really important for you guys to hear, and your capacity to keep focused and keep fighting matters more than you even know. It's astonishing, I think, to a lot of people that you and your circle of influence can have tremendous impact on public policy. And the reason for that is so few people actually use their circle of influence to have impact on public policy. And that's one of the things we're trying to do, Americans for Limited Government, to provide you the tools to engage, to provide you things to engage on. And whether it be through the Facebook page, the YouTube channel, or the Rumble channel, or the Getter page, those are all ways that we're reaching out. Instagram also, we're on the entire gamut of pages, Parler, so Gab. So we're on a lot of different venues. Bottom line is we're trying to provide you with capacity to take action. And what we need you to do, because we're putting a lot of resources, money into doing this, what we need you to do is to use it. We need you to get your friends to use it. We need you to become the advocate in your town, amongst your circle of influence, whether it be in a town or nationwide. We need you to use your circle of influence, use the tools, because A, they're not cheap, but B, they're free to you. Okay, so use the tools, because we cannot, sitting here in Washington, D.C., in Fairfax, Virginia, we cannot succeed if you aren't pulling the oars. All we can do is say, there's the direction, there's the hill, let's take it. But we can't do it, but you can. And we're just trying to provide you with the means to do that. So use the tools, subscribe. If you haven't already subscribed, you know how to hit the button, hit the bell. So you get notified when these things are happening. And when you get to take action, that in your inbox. If you're subscribed, if you get a 10, sign up for the email. Go to getliberty.org, and that's GETLIBERTY.org. Go there and subscribe so you get a daily email from us. And when we send you something to take action on, if it's something you care about, take action. Send it to your friends. Put it up on your Facebook page. Have your people who follow you on Facebook be able to take action. We have to use the tools. We have to use Mark Zuckerberg's tool against Mark Zuckerberg's political interests by getting people on there it's the largest group of conservatives in one place in the world. We just have to find them, and they're following you. That's where we find them. So take those take action tools, put them on, take the articles that we send out, put them on your Facebook page, use your social media tools, send them out to your email lists, put them on your Twitter, send them out on Twitter, and become the person who's leading a group of people in this fight. Because if 100 of you are leading 10 people each, that's 1,000 people who are contacting Congress. If those people are all leading 10 people each, suddenly you're up to 10,000 people. So we can build this thing, but it all starts with you. So thanks for all you do. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government. And I just appreciate all of you, each one of you, what you do. And thank you very much. With that.